それでは時間となりましたので、スタートさせていただき
So we would
ま
like
す。
to start the session. This year, ACK Talks will hold a program to examine art, society, and our own resilience from a variety of perspectives with the aim of enhancing conference functions and building a community centered on culture and the arts. In addition to the field of art, we have invited experts from various fields such as politics, economics, fashion, architecture, and food to present 9 sessions that cross a variety of fields covering trends in the world of art scene, the current state of the market, learning through art, and the connections between people.
こちらの
Under
トー
the
クで
title of The Cave, Exploring Cultural Resonance, behind the scenes of Oliver Bier's latest monumental work, artist Oliver Bier, François Canton, director of Collection Lambert in Avignon, France, and curator Tomoya Iwata will join us to learn about the background of Oliver Bier's work as he attempts to transcend cultural and temporal frameworks. We will also consider how we can preserve, pass on, maintain, and develop not only art, but human culture as a whole. So then, please take it away.
はじめまして。
So, hello everybody. I am the talk moderator. My name is Tomoya Iwata. And I would like to go straight into the session, but in this talk session, to have a smoother communication, I am going to talk entirely in English from now. So if you need assistance with translation, please use your translation device and switch to Japanese channel.
Hello, good afternoon. I hope that everybody will be able to hear the simultaneous translation. And I want to just thank the fair for this amazing invitation and Yukiko Yamashita for this opportunity to talk about my latest work. And I'm really looking forward to talking with Tomo and Francois, who I've known for a long time, about the piece. And I'm just going to start by talking a little bit about my background, where I'm from, how this project came about, and show you a few previous works. Is everyone hearing me? And yeah, looks like it. Good. So the project is called The Cave, and I've been working on it for 3 years, but I've been dreaming about it for 10 years. So it's really like a piece that means and has meant a lot to the last chapter of my life. But it comes out of a practice that goes back, I guess, this is 2008. I studied visual art at the Ruskin in Oxford, but I also first studied musical composition. And music was always a very important part of my life. I was in a band. I left the band to study art, and I always kept making music and art together. And I then studied cinema at the Sorbonne in Paris. And so the union really between these disciplines, like where music meets art, meets film, is always been like a very strong place for me to find my work. And even when I was like super young, this is in 2008, and it's actually the first work in what's called the Resonance Project. It's this long series of pieces which are live performances or films where I find an architectural space and I make the architectural space sing. And ever since I was a kid, I had this sort of slightly uncanny sensitivity to the musicality of space and objects. And if you imagine, like, when you make a wine glass sing with the tip of your finger, or when you blow over the top of a bottle, you're just making a space sing. That's all that's happening. Like seashell, for example, which is an inanimate object, but you can still hear it even though it's silent. Every space is actually just like a seashell. It has its own acoustic fingerprint, its own acoustic character, its own musicality. And in the same way that you can't make a wine glass without making a musical note, you also can't make a building without making a musical note. And you can't make a vessel, a pot, without making a musical note. There's like an intrinsic musicality to the world which we really forget. And our visual culture privileges visual information so much that this kind of very deep sensitivity to sound is lost. And if you start to listen really hard, you can find that there's music really absolutely everywhere. And this is where this series began. And when I was, I guess, I don't know, it was 2008, so I was a bit younger, still at Oxford. And in my second year, I visited the Pompidou Center, and I realized that this long tunnel at the top was like an amazing organ pipe. And I realized that if I sang a B flat, it would sing a B flat back to me 20 times louder than my voice. It was incredibly moving discovery. And so I found some singers, and I bought tickets for the singers, and I took them into the Pompidou Center, and I got them to perform for me a composition. I filmed them for 6 hours. The public loved it, the security guards loved it, everyone clapped, and then I left. And 5 years later, I showed the video to the curators of the Pompidou Center, who said, "This is great, but we don't remember programming this performance." And I said, "You didn't program it, but it was a great success," and they offered to do it for real. And that was then my first institutional piece, was that they allowed me back into the Pompidou Center with some of the best singers in Paris to really make the building into an instrument, a musical instrument. And this principle of finding a building and making the building sing is really so incredibly, it's different every time, because every building sings a different note. And every time you work with a new singer in a new space, that singer brings something of themselves into the work as well. And so this has gradually evolved over the years, and I've sometimes made work in very humble places, like these are the sewers in Brighton, which happen to have the same diameter as the Pompidou Center, so they sing the same note as the Pompidou. This is a hammam, a bathhouse in Istanbul, for the Istanbul Biennale, where I worked with local Turkish singers, in a very intense, you can imagine that the hammam is really like a wine glass, even the same shape. And so this project over the years has taken me to museums, concert halls. I worked with the Sydney Opera House, but also very strange and humble places. I'd always dreamt of caves, and I even built a cave in Tasmania. You guys maybe know this museum, which is the Museum of Old and New Art in Tasmania. And I designed for them an acoustic cave which runs from the ground 2-3 stories underground in the museum. And you can see that this is my drawing for it. When you stand in front of the cave, your voice is captured like an ear trumpet or gramophone and carried deep, 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 deep down underground. And if you're underground, you can go into this silent space, and you suddenly find that all of the sound from above is reaching you. And you can whisper down here, and your voice is amplified enormously up at the top, and you can whisper at the top, and your voice is carried all the way down. And it's called a confessional, partly because you'll never really meet the person that you're talking to, because to get from the top to the bottom, you have to walk for about half an hour around the museum. And it really, if you like, starts to materialize the way in which our voice is such a powerful way to touch each other, but also to how the relationship to the world around us and to architecture, to space, can completely transform our relationship to each other through sound, through music. It's almost hard to describe. All of the pieces I'm showing you, if you feel them in real life, you feel something, but when you see them on paper, it feels like a theory or a phenomenon, But it's a very tender experience to be connected to someone through your voice and through the architecture. And so all of that to say, here are the pictures of the cave. And this is the building site. It was a big project. It took 5 years. And the result is something very gentle and subtle. That's the facade of the museum, and all it is an empty space. And that empty volume connects people in a very deep way. There's some really nice stories about people both having a great time and laughing, but also having quite emotional experiences in this space. Another kind of cave is a vessel, a vase. Every time you make a vessel, you're making an empty space, and every time you make an empty space, you're making a musical note. And in 2019, I was asked to do an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And the Met gave me access to their whole collection to build a musical instrument, because I found a way of making a vessel sing without touching the vessel. So just like making a wine glass sing, but without the need to actually touch it. And that phenomenon, it took me a long time to persuade them I wasn't going to break anything, but eventually they said that I could listen to all the vessels, and they have hundreds of thousands of vessels in the museum. And every vessel has one note, has one specific note that's related to its form, its geometry. And out of those thousands of notes, those thousands of vessels, I chose 32 vessels that sang perfectly in harmony with each other. Or perfectly, it's a very cultural thing, harmony. But these were singing the black and white notes of the piano. And you can see in the middle here, so this is the top floor of the Met. There's a keyboard, but this keyboard doesn't make any sound. When you press down a key, it just turns on the microphone inside the vessel, and the vessel feeds back the note at the exact note of the vessel. It's amplifying the sound that's been in the vessel ever since it was made. And I chose, these 32 notes, 32 vessels, so that when you play them together, you amplify them together and you hear harmony. And the oldest vessel in the piece is this one here. This was 7,000-year-old vessel from Mesopotamia, before it was even called Mesopotamia. And the newest were these amazing Betty Woodmans from 2003. And you can imagine the idea of harmonizing all of these objects from different cultures, different origins. It was actually very problematic for the museum, because it has a very clear museum hierarchy about which objects can be shown and how. And so this was kind of radical, to present objects from such diverse origins with the logic not coming through cultural tropes, but through musical ones. And because it's playable, I was able to invite musicians like Philip Glass, like Laurie Anderson, like Nico Muli, Mashru Leila, Lebanese band, to come and make performances. So it was both an installation that was aesthetic and had a very clear, historical logic, but it was also an instrument that could be transformed every time a new voice, a new musical voice joined it and chose to play it. Very similar, I'm just showing you works that you may have encountered over the years. This is at the Venice Biennale, not this one, but the one before. And it's the smallest chapel in Venice. And I filled it with tiny little effigies, little hollow animals and animal vessels, which were exactly the same principle as the Met, but in this kind of almost animistic installation. And I played for 24 hours on the opening, from 9 p.m. until 9 p.m. Because the chapel was so small, we could only fit 5 people in. So instead of having 500 people in the room, I had to just play constantly for 24 hours. And that was an experience as well. It was kind of a very transcendental experience. And actually, right now by Art Matters Museum in Hangzhou, in China, I have an exhibition of a cat orchestra, which is cat vessels from all over the world, which is going to be there for 6 months, actually. So if anyone is in Shanghai or Hangzhou, you can pop by and see my cat orchestra being played. And then to give you a little bit of a background more to the cave, which is what we're coming to, I've been talking to you about sound and about resonance. And it's such an abstract thing, you know. Music for us is something that we hear through our headphones, or we go to a concert and we enjoy the music. But when you go to a concert, if you could see the air moving, you'd see that the musicians are making the most beautiful geometry in the air just through the vibrations. It's like the surface of water. You know, when you throw a stone onto the surface of a pond, no matter which pond in the whole world, you throw a stone in and you see perfect circles, concentric circles coming out from that stone. And every singer that you ever go to hear, even my voice coming through these speakers right now at you, if you could see it, you'd see incredible waves, like three-dimensional geometry that we're all bathing in. And it happens to be moving your eardrums and moving the three tiny bones in your body, the ossicles of the inner ear. And those three tiny bones are the last thing that physically vibrates before this geometry gets turned into a thought. And in this case, the thought is language, because it's what we're talking about right now. But when you go to hear music, that geometry becomes so, how do I put this? It's almost impossible for me to separate it from the history of abstract painting, because as soon as you think about a Frank Stella or an Agnes Martin, or even Monet, so this is why I'm showing you these pieces. I found a way, and it had to paint using sound without ever touching the canvas, only using sound to move pigment. And I'm just going to show you how I do it because it's the easiest thing. So you're going to hear and see the process in my studio where I lay my canvas horizontally and I put a loudspeaker underneath the canvas and I play very pure harmonies, and the speaker moves the air into these geometries that we're talking about, and then the air moves the pigment into those same shapes. And suddenly you have an incredible level of control over the painting that you're making. And you can see at the end that cross that forms. That's what happens when I played a perfect fifth, so a relationship between 1 and 5. And I guess this background in music allowed me to realize that I could paint in a really precise way. And just for example, I was invited last year to respond to Monet's Water Lilies in the Orangerie in Paris for the Festival of Impressionism. And I gave myself the challenge of painting water lilies only using sound. It's something I'd always wanted to do, but never kind of dared. But I did realize that, Monet had been painting vibrations for 30 years. The surface of his pond is basically the way light is changed by waves and by vibration. And that was why I said yes to this project, because it felt so intuitively right, He had 30 years. I only had 18 months to paint my water lilies. But they were, if you like, whenever we're talking about resonance and we're talking about sound and the cave that we're going to be talking about, it is very much a relationship between form and music that's really intrinsic. And here, for example, you can see a low note. Here you can see 2 medium notes, like in the middle of the scale. Here it's higher, and like according to the harmonies that I play, I can make incredibly precise paintings. Sometimes very watery like this, sometimes much more stormy. Or this is one of my favorite recent ones I made. It's like you can work, you can make an acoustic Rothko or an acoustic, color field painting. I even challenged myself to paint a figure like a human figure, using just sound, and you can see that like it's a challenge, but I really want this to be not just a phenomenon, but actually a real way to paint, like Warhol's piss paintings or Yves Klein's fire paintings, but like really dense. And so all of that to give you the backdrop to this new work called The Cave. And The Cave is a project that I made in France, in the very famous Palaeolithic caves that you often find in the first pages of the art history book, like Lascaux. This is in Dordogne as well, just next to Lascaux, the same age, better preserved. And I had always imagined that there would be a relationship between painting on the walls in these ancient spaces and the resonance of the space. You see pictures of them, you see maps of them, and I knew intuitively that there would be an amazing resonance, just like a vessel, just like a space that would sing. And I met the archaeologists who run these spaces in about 2019, and that was the first time I realized that if I persuaded them, they might let me in. It's very restricted. They count the hours of breath because the breath can affect the paintings, and so obviously, like it's hard to access. Singing is a really breath-heavy activity, and so it was always going to be a challenge. They are very, very beautiful. They're full of bison and horses and abstract paintings as well. Like the first ever abstract painting in the history of humanity is in this space. And the first ones that we have a trace of. There's obviously the ones that we've survived. So I went inside, and I won actually a French prize called Monde Nouveau, which was funding big projects after the pandemic. I had to go and meet Macron, and it was a very, what's the word? It was a very important moment, I guess, after the pandemic to try to reinvigorate culture in the arts. And I went down with my microphone and my headphones recording, but above all I was singing, because I knew that if I went through and I sang in the right spaces, I'd be able to, this was my guesswork before I went in, but I knew that if I went to the right spots, I would be able to sing the notes that would make the cave sing back to me. And this is my map, the drawing I made to show where all the different musical notes could be found. But the strongest ones were in very specific places. So here, for example, in this space where that cross is right there, I took the head archaeologist into that space, and he's an amazing man. He's called Jean-Michel Geneste. He was the curator of Lascaux. He created the facsimile of Chauvet, which is a very important cave as well. And we took him to this space, and I whispered a low F. You can see that there's an F2 that's written there on the map. And I just sang like, and the cave went like a huge sound, like a shocking sound. And that's the moment that I realized that we would be able to work together, because he was like, this is after 30 years of going to these spaces, he'd never heard the voice of the cave, like the explosion of sound, the kind of everyone, you see your hair go on the back of your neck, go up as you feel this sound, because in a way the most I guess moving thing about it is that sound hasn't changed for 20,000 years, because the shape of the cave hasn't changed. And when I was with these archaeologists, I went around the space like blind, if you like, without looking at the paintings, finding the notes. You sing like, and then you hear the right one, and then it expands enormously. And then we would do that, and then we would turn on the lights, and we would see that there was a concentration of bison paintings right in front of us at that specific point. And I would go through further, and it was really magical. So what did I do with this phenomenon? Like, I made this map of the cave. I found this I guess instrument, this like geological instrument, and I invited 8 singers from all over the world. Some very well-known singers like Rufus Wainwright from Canada. Also a French singer like Woodkid, Melissa Lavo, who's from Haiti. Mashu Leila, amazing band led by Hamed Sino. Also a Japanese singer called Michiko Takahashi. And I took them one by one into the cave, and I taught them how to make the cave sing in these specific points. And I wrote and filmed a video opera in the cave, because I knew that no one would be able to come visit the cave because it's like very hard to get inside. So the idea was to really bring the cave into back out into the world, and I went down with them. I taught them how to make the cave sing, and I asked each of them to find the note, make it sing, but then to sing their earliest musical memory. So I asked each of them, like, what is the very first thing that you ever remember hearing in your life when you were a child? And obviously for each singer it was linked to their mother or their father, like a childhood memory. And I, as a composer, was able to take those fragments which came from Lebanon, that came from Japan, it came from France, from Denmark, and write them in such a way that there would be like a polyphony, where the cave is like the tuning fork. Because, like I said, the cave never changes its note, and that means that every time I took a singer down, over 3 years, they were always perfectly in tune with the singer that came before them, because the cave was like this common line, common thread running between them. And I designed a space. This is my first design, like 3 years ago, or 4, where each singer would have one screen, and you'd be able to walk between the screens and hear their voices one by one, or hear them all together. And when I was invited to do the Lyon Biennale this year, it was just like the most perfect invitation ever, because it's not so far from the caves, it's in France. It's a huge, amazing space, 1,500 square meters, which was so close to what I'd imagined. And I was able to create exactly what I had kind of dreamt of, like a video opera on 8 screens in this vast space. And I'm actually just going to play you a little, like there's a little teaser here that gives you like a feeling for the space when you walk through it. It's got a little interview as well. I whispered the right note to the cave, and the cave screamed its note back at me 10 times louder. We knew that something special was going on. The project's called The Cave. It's a video opera with 8 incredible singers from all over the world. You see the singers gradually tuning themselves into the note of the cave until their voice expands way beyond their body. As a composer, I asked them, what is the first thing that you ever sung? It's like this deeply embedded piece of musical DNA. The cave ties them all together harmonically with this amazing, strong, resonant low F that it sings. When you walk in, there's this meandering path that you can follow so that you can have a really intimate experience with one singer. And feel that kind of sweetness of their childhood song. But then when you move gradually through the space, it starts to blend with the others. When you find yourself in the very middle, you have this perfect polyphony of all of these melodies arriving to you at the same time.
I don't know where I belong.
So the cave is a kind of shared space that predates all of our cultures. So that gives you like a feeling for it. Thank you. For like a feeling, because honestly it's almost why we're doing this talk as well, because unless you go there, you can't really feel this. I don't know. It's like a three-dimensional composition in a space. It's almost like you're with all of them. And one of the singers told me that when he saw the final piece, it was like his experience had been amplified. I'm just going to play you a little section of four together, so that you can also see that you begin the journey above ground, and you follow all of the singers as they discover the paintings and then tune themselves into the space. I'm not going to play you all of this. I'll play a little part of it to give you the feeling. Perfect. So you see them discover the cave and make their way inside. And whilst they're outside, their voices have no connection because there's nothing holding them together. But when they make it inside, you hear the sound of the cave, because you'll hear it in a second. You whisper to the cave, and then this is the sound that comes back. And so that's the keynote.
Les petits poissons dans l'eau nagent, 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 nagent. Les petits poissons dans l'eau nagent aussi bien que les gros. Les petits gros nagent comme il faut. Les gros, les petits nagent bien aussi. Les petits poissons dans l'eau nagent, 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 nagent.
So there you had three pieces of music. Les Petits Poissons is a French song. À la Clairefontaine, which is a French song but by an American singer because it happened to be his heritage. And a voodoo song from Haiti, which is what Melissa Laveau brought. And so that's just three together. Later, in a second, I will play you the Japanese section because it's a very nice key moment in the piece. Is the Japanese singer Michiko, who sings Antadaka Dokusa, which was a really complicated piece of music to fit into an 8-part polyphony, but it worked out. I was talking about paintings because the paintings in this show are integral to the experience of it. You're upstairs at first, but you walk then down a ramp, this ramp here, underground, and you can see that at the end of the tunnel there's a painting. And when you get down there, there's 8 more paintings. And each of those paintings are made with a sound, and they're made using the voices of each of those 8 singers and the resonance of the cave. And over the years, I've learned really how to paint as if I was painting with my hands. And I wanted to paint a series of paintings that would move from this dark, earthy, underground space all the way through to this kind of transcendental, celestial feeling that you get when music takes you on a journey. You're no longer in the space that you're in, And so I was able to research the same pigments as they have in the cave, so like the oldest pigments that we have in human history, and make a series that starts with very dark, deep, earthy tones, and then voice by voice, I worked through until that journey from the kind of earth to sky is sort of made, I guess, I don't know, it's like say concretiser, it's manifested, you know? And so that by the time you get like halfway through, you're reaching these colors that, of course, this one in particular, you can kind of see the bison almost from the cave, splitting away from the ochre, red ochre and the yellow ochre. And then suddenly there's this kind of gash in the universe, and you're in this completely transcendental space. And the last one, which is called El Helwadi, which is the song that Hamed Sino sings in the cave, you're in this kind of explosion of color. Again, I'm just going to show you like what it looks like when I'm painting. And you can see how like that sort of fluidity, almost like the pigment becomes water, but it's all obviously completely dry when I'm painting. And you can see these details from the pictures and how each note, you know, like a high resonance or a low resonance, the screen's a little bit saturated, but you get the idea. And like tiny bits of blue pigment, because you find blue in the geology of the space as well. And it was important, I guess, to make these paintings because when you're in the space, you are, and both when you're in the cave and when you're in the installation, those like waves and vibrations that I was talking about are all around you. You know, your brain and your ears are telling you that music is happening, but really this is what you're experiencing. I had a really amazing experience. A lady who was deaf, who had cochlear implants, wrote to me just through Instagram saying that she'd seen the paintings, and that as someone who like had a different relationship to sound, this was how she felt sound was to her. And that was like the most moving thing, honestly, for me, was the idea that there is something intrinsic in sound and music that relates to the visual world. And I think as artists, if we don't forget that, or if we unforget that, then we have this new way of seeing. And I'm going to finish up pretty quick so that we can move to conversation. I just wanted to play you two final little clips, so total will be about 4 minutes. You see in the exhibition interviews with every one of the singers. When you go downstairs, in front of the paintings, there's this series of monitors, and each monitor shows a conversation between me and the singer, where I was asking them about their experience and what it felt like for them to sing in there and what their music meant. And it told the story of their mothers and their grandparents and the history of colonialism in Haiti or in Australia. I brought a singer from Australia because we still have a tradition of rock art in Australia to this day. And I'm going to play you this little clip of Michiko Takahashi telling us about her experience, part of her interview.
J'ai un peu de symptômes de claustrophobie et j'ai un peu peur. Au début, avant que je rentrais. Mais dès que je rentrais, c'est pas vraiment chaud, mais l'ambiance, il y a un truc chaleureux. Et c'est l'ambiance chaleureuse, c'est comme, je sais pas, peut-être c'est que moi qui sens, mais comme je suis dans le ventre de ma mère, un peu. C'est ça que j'ai vraiment ressens. Et puis en chantant, je sens les résonances, j'entends les résonances qui me répondent, bien sûr. Mais c'est pas comme l'écho, les échos quand j'entends la montagne, c'est différent. Je sens que c'est vivant, plus vivant. Peut-être que c'est grâce à la peinture comme ça. Ou bien sûr, les peintures étaient dessinées par les humains. Donc peut-être ça reste une sorte de l'âme qui reste. Et ça qui me répond, pas forcément répond, qui me demande, qui me pose la question aussi.
She was great. And then the very last thing I'm going to do before we have a discussion is just play a 2-minute clip of the part where Michiko sings Antadako Dokosa. And if you can imagine this a little bit like, I don't know if you guys know the surrealist way of drawing, which is called exquisite corpse, cadavre esquisse. When you start with the drawing a head, then you fold over and you draw the body, and you fold the paper and you draw the middle, and then you fold it and you draw the legs, and you fold it and you draw the feet. This process of composition was a little bit like that. With each singer, I went down with the first singer, and then I met the next singer, and I had to make their first memory work with the first memory of the first, and then the next memory, and then the next memory, and then I had to write the music so that all of those pieces of music would work together. And the Japanese one was actually the last one that I recorded, and it was the most challenging, but I also think it's the one that gave the piece, in the end, the most kind of joyful feel to it. So you guys can tell me. I'll just play you a little clip.
I don't speak native tongue. I was I don't know where I belong. I don't know where I belong. I don't speak
There we are.
Thank you so much, Oliver, for your beautiful presentation. And then maybe we better give applause to him, first of all. And then we would like to come into discussion, conversation, or whatsoever we call. But actually, so we're now here as sort of like part of the discussion today. François and me is sort of like listening to the conversation and giving a comments. But the huge difference actually between me, François, you and me is you actually saw this piece, right? And then so in that sense, I'm more like close to you, everyone. So I would like to join this conversation more like an active audience, I would say. But yeah, so I would like to hear your comments as a person who actually experienced this artwork. And also it turned out through the conversation that François is also used to be a musician by himself. So it would be very interesting to hear comments from that perspective as well.
Thank you. Hello. The first thing I would like to do is I would like to quote a great Japanese artist, sound artist, Atsushi Nishijima, who I had the chance to invite actually in Paris some 15 years ago. And Nishijima says, the essence of sound is relationship. The relationships behind the phenomenon of sound are not merely physical. which I think is a very important thing to understand also to talk about this and the piece. We are all passed through with many sounds, and you can't avoid those sounds. You can't decide not hearing things the way you close your eyes, for instance. So we all pass through different kind of sounds all the time. And the fact that you would be listening to my voice or to this fantastic work instead of other things, and we are surrounded by a lot of sound here and noise. The fact that you're listening to this particular thing is an act, and it's an act which has to deal with the thinking. And the thinking in terms of the way you orientate your thinking, but also the way you compose with your emotions as well. So this act is something which is confusingly mixed between abstract things and very much related to who you are and where you are and the situation you're in. So I'm saying that because I think it's very important with Oliver's work, particularly. We've known each other for a long time, and when I met Oliver, I was in the jury for your pavilion thing, so that was more than 12 years ago. And I remember very well you presented one of your very first pieces, which was a piece where your mother was singing like a note for like 3 minutes, and she was like singing. I don't know whether she was actually singing for 3 minutes, but I think you cheated a bit on this. No? Never, okay. But it was this one note, and then she would say, like, with the ukulele, what emotional relationship she would have had with that note according to this tune or this other. And that was really interesting to me. And I remember also this other piece you shown, which was just like a floor you had on the wall, which I think was your grandmother's floor. So, like, I immediately got that not only the sound for Oliver is linked to like the person, something very intimate and very personal, but also it has a relationship with space, which is actually what you've been digging into for that amount of time. So there's something which is important, I think, to understand here is that we associate the work of Oliver with sound and music, which is, of course, legitimate because Oliver is a composer as much as an artist. But I mean, his work is more to materialize through frequences, relationship of sensitive intimacy and individual interacting with architecture, environment, or even with other persons. So I'm thinking about this piece where two people are singing in the other's person's mouth, kissing each other, which was absolutely fabulous work. So there's this thing about sound as being something related to invisible memory and feeling and, I don't know, love or very emotional, personal thing. And in a way, I think Oliver sets this beautiful hypothesis that sound, in a way, contains some kind of harmonic memories, about the environment, about where you are, who you are at the moment where you are. So to go back to the work, it's a fantastic installation. I hope it's going to be traveling and have a long life. It's all those screens together. You're just in the cave and you see all those singers, but you really feel and you really have the feeling you're inside. And you're inside the belly. Indeed, what she says is absolutely true. I mean, you have this kind of material, motherhood feeling, as being like in the belly, and there is something which is like a kind of gravity and solemnity with this piece, which for me has to do by the fact that the note of the frequency of the cave is actually an F, which is not a note that you choose, but you took advantage of it and you compose around it. So you can feel while listening to the work that the whole thing is very highly composed. As you could hear, with this thing, like all the notes are like really fitting together so well, because it kind of turns around this note of F, and I'm not going into music in detail, but I mean the tonality have different kind of impression. I would say like G would be more like light sky kind of impression. D would be more like joy, I would say. Well, F has this kind of very gravity and solemnity feeling for composition, and even Franz Schubert wrote a big essay about F and this kind of particular feeling about this tonality. Like Vivaldi, the Four Seasons, the autumn is in F. F major, and actually the winter is in F minor. So there is something which I think is, for me, is very, very strong, and like Lascia ch'io pianga, which is like the saddest song from the Baroque music by Handel, is in F minor as well. So there is something for me that relate this piece to a whole history about musical composition and the relationship to this particular thing. And I think this kind of gravity has to deal with this notion of heritage. You use the word heritage, which of course is very important here. You have the feeling when you listen to the piece that it goes far beyond than the mere experience of just listening to one thing, but it relates to something that goes, like way beyond and far beyond the simple moment. For that, I wanted to also reference another important author for me, who is Ryoko Sekiguchi, Japanese author and poet living in France. And she actually just wrote a beautiful book called La Voix Sombre, The Dark Voice. And the dark voice is about recorded voices of the missings, like, all the people that are dead, and you listen to the voice, and the voice comes back to a new present, which is a present of the listening to the voice, even though people are not there. And what's the feeling of this, particular relationship of bringing to presence somebody who's by the recording does not. If I may, I'd like to just quote one sentence that she has. She says, "And all the voices that have been recorded, do you still remain in the air, change into evanescent waves, although unable to reach the ears of the living? Where can we meet them? Where will our voice mix with those that were never recorded?" And I was kind of thinking that there are voices that are recorded, but some of the voices recorded maybe carrying other voices of the non-recorded things that may be still floating in the air, that may be still present somehow. And I think that's the hypothesis that you put together with this piece, is that, like the painter in the caves back in like 100,000 years, they were maybe singing while painting. Maybe that's why they were selecting this particular spot in the cave, because that's the place where they might have been singing while painting, and maybe it would have been done together. And that's interesting because this whole thing makes it all the more interesting, because there is this physicist, John Charpak, artist Sadhana Fif, had done a piece according to Charpak's theory or idea that maybe ceramic makers, while they were making ceramics, they might have been singing, and maybe they've been actually engraving things onto the ceramic, and maybe there might be ways to listen to their voice maybe like 1,000 years after, because it's like a disc, like an LP. It would be, I don't know if it's true, but as the Italian says, se non è vero è ben trovato. If it's not true, it's well found. But I love this idea, and maybe there is something in this piece also that set the idea that while looking at the painting, there is something of their voice at the time that remained there somehow, So having people there singing, they are singing their song, but they're also singing the song that they heard when they were kids. So through their voice, they embody several voices, their own, the voices of maybe their mother or father, whoever sung the, you know, the lullaby, and maybe the voice or the resonance of the people that were inhabiting the cave and that were painting the thing. And I found that absolutely magical. There's something that is very difficult to describe in other words than just magic, because you are in the middle of an embodiment of several layers of light, going back to the very origin of civilization in a way, and in such a light and beautiful way. So I don't know. There's something I don't know. I'm thinking of The Invention of Morel by Biol Casares. This idea that you know, this novel, Biol Casares is reading this novel that in this island, people would live for eternity in a recorded machine that would record their life, you know, and that would be a way to repeating all the time something which is recorded, and they'll be inhabiting the island, you know, like this. There is something like that, you know, in the piece as well, which is very, for me, very, very strong, very magical. That's what I could say, you know, about my impressions.
Actually, thank you so much for very rich comment, and you prepared a lot of like entrances to dig further into like his pieces, and then there's a lot to talk about. I would like to for now focus two things, and then the first thing is actually the very first topic you mentioned, that how can I say, the identity of the person, or like the body of the one who's actually giving out the voice, and also like who are like speaking, who are actually singing. And then the other thing is about the spatial perspective of the of your work, cave as a space of resonance, or like, you know, cavity as a space to, you know, make the resonance happening. And so I would like to start from the very first thing, but so since the theme of the talk is about like cross-cultural like perspective, so I actually was wondering, like, so you understand like what they're singing in their own language, because obviously they're coming from a different cultural background. So, and then each culture has its own kind of like musical system, and then like sound phonetic system as well. So those, what they're singing was totally different from each other. And then like I think it would be easy that, you know, there's some discordance happening. But as everyone saw, like the sound is perfectly in tune, perfectly in harmony. So yeah, I'm just wondering how you think of this kind of like different culture resonating with each other in a very harmonical way, and also like how you think about this kind of like what they're talking about is also like, you know, actually somehow related to the sound like quality as well.
Yeah, every singer, when you ask them that question, and just like every one of you guys, if I asked you like what is the very first piece of music that you ever remember hearing, it's such a rich question, because it's so personal and so unique to your culture and your family. And if you think now like about that first fragment of music, all of you will have someone, a person in your life that sang it to you, and they probably had someone that sang it to them. And it's what Francois was saying about this kind of layers and layers of voices which accumulate, and that's how music evolves as well over time. And so when I asked that question to each of the singers, it took us each time into a very intimate conversation. And I have to say that every time I watch the film, the experience, my personal experience with each singer was almost like when you do an interview or a documentary film on someone, and you have to go under their skin and understand what made them tick, what musical DNA they want to bring to this piece, and then the privilege of like composing in a way that allows that to work with other people's sort of DNAs. But for example, you know, the meaning of each song was, and also the song itself, is completely out of my control as an artist. In a way, there's a lot of questions around, me in my own life is about what the artist's role is. And, you know, I studied composition, but I don't want to write symphonies and big pieces of operas that are all about my voice and writing, you know, consecrating some great work of music on paper and then hoping it survives. It's much more interesting for me to ask a question like that and put it in a space where the answer will resonate with all of the other answers. And in that sense, I have no control. I love that, you know. And so, for example, the Lebanese singer Hamed Sino, his song, earliest musical memory, was a song called El Helwadi, which is an Arabic song about workers having to go and strive and putting their faith in God despite this suffering that they're undergoing. And it's very much a utopian socialist dream that he's singing, but came from his mum. And it's the most tender thing that he could be singing, but also the most politically charged. And Rufus Wainwright sang À la Clairefontaine, which is a French song that goes back centuries, that reached him through his Canadian mother in Quebec. And it's a song that she sang to him that he says that he can't even remember the first time he heard it. It's so deeply embedded in his soul. And he also remembered singing it to his mum when his mum was dying in hospital and she was in a coma. The whole family got round together and sang that with her. And for a second, she woke up and tried to sing it with her, which also just like makes when you see him singing it in the cave and you know that is his relation, his link, and the music was strong enough to reach his mum, you know, even in that state. There's a real, how do I put this? Like letting go of control in that sense and finding these musics was amazing. The Japanese song as well, Ante da Kodokosa. Of course, like I had to understand what each song meant, or try to understand what each song meant when I was working them together. But it's almost like it's more like a revelation than something that already is there than it is a composition, you know.
Thank you so much. Actually, it's very interesting that you are like saying about, how can I say, you're mentioning that like you have no control over like what is actually happening there. And then because I also think that it's also connected to your painting as well, and also your like entire like, you know, over as well, because you mentioned that you actually like make the, for example, the Met piece, this like bezel piece, like you mentioned that you know, I'm just making like making bezels sing. And also for that, like, you know, resonance painting, you're also let the sound, you know, paint as its own. So your way of like your like creation of the artworks is very much dependent on the actually giving up on the agency, you know, on your own. And then that is also a very important part, I think. And then that is actually giving leading to another like aspect of your work, which is about like particle frequencies and in relation to the resonance, because you know, it's actually a bit hard to like frame this, but so within your work in the experience of like, you know, how can I say, like soundscape, first of all, like how can I say, like it's all about like frequencies, and then like when the frequency is actually happening through this, you know, particles is actually, you know, drumming your like, you know, earballs or whatsoever, and then that is actually very how can I say, dependent on the like quality of the space, or like, you know, traits of the space, because how, you know, this, you know, frequencies are happening, how this, you know, trembling of the air is happening is totally dependent on like, you know, how this kind of like, you know, for example, the material of the walls, or like, you know, how big the space is or whatsoever. And then that is actually allowing how can I say, like different like entities to be merged together. And then so like even though this cave work is actually all those singers are singing in a different timing, but still it sounding like everyone is singing at the same place and then at the same time. So all the different like frequencies actually putting together. So I found it very interesting that you're talking about this kind of like giving up the control over the artworks, and then yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right, and that allowing those things like these stories behind the work to come into the piece it comes from the singer, and the melody comes from the singer. I think what definitely happens with a lot of my work is that I'll start with a very open question like that, and then I guess after all these years of like writing music, studying composition, being in a band, studying art, studying cinema, which is so precise, and like to make a film is so precise. There were so many visual tracks and audio tracks to you imagine there were 8 singers and 12 microphones for each singer, and to make these final works takes so much precision that the balance between if you like what is out of my control, like the songs that the singers will bring. But then my job as an artist is to find a way to musically make all of those things work as one composition. And that took me, like so many months and months and months of calculation, and just then to be able to go back to the singer and say, okay, well, you can still sing your original song, but just sing it like this, and with this timing, and I'm not going to change it so much that you don't still feel it. It's still you, but now it's going to work with this next person and this next person. The same is true of the paintings. Like with the paintings, it really is not. There's nothing random anymore with the painting. I've learned how to paint really precisely, and I often will paint the same painting twice to remind myself that I'm in control of the situation. And there, it's not the question of agency is more like these harmonies are universal, and I can't control what geometries are possible, but I can control what forms appear on the canvas by very precisely combining, thirds, fourths, fifths, like dissonance, harmony, and so it's kind of funny, really, that there is always like a kind of desire to let go, but I think I can't help but always end up coming back to being like ultra precise at the end piece, That's why as well with the paintings, like you saw the female figure that I had painted using sound. That was almost like the opposite of losing agency. It was a way to find something that's universal and make it specific, if that makes sense.
I think that's what it's not working. Yeah, I think that's what creating is all about. It's composing with the existing and make it. But it's important to say with this piece that at the beginning they all sing the same thing, which is something that you composed for them according to this note and this frequency of the space. So I think that's very interesting also in terms of composing the space and composing with this human component of people that are coming with all those culture, everywhere in the world, is that they're all singing the same thing and they're all tuned with the space, and then they start to, go their way, every one of them, even though they are all in tune. Each one is singing their own thing. So I mean, if you see the whole installation. The beginning, as you could see, is like you see them outside, and they all have their own tune, their own thing, and then they enter in the thing, and they start to sing this one thing that you compose, so that they're all in tune in a way. And then from that, they go deeper into their own, music and history with this music and that's the beauty of it. And indeed, it must have been like a very difficult composition to have them all tuned, and it's like it's a fugue. I mean, it's very much like a counterpoint exercise, and it must have been a huge work to compose this.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting to hear that comment because, like, first of all, we cannot like experience this kind of like walkthrough and also like spatial experience. But I'm wondering, is so like just connecting to the past works as well. I felt like within your artworks, you're coming back and forth between different scales. For example, this cave work, human beings are, we are as an audience, like are the ones who's actually walking through, and then like try to have a like, make a like, how can I say, like impromptu relationship with the space, with our own body. But on the other hand, in the past work, let's say like the med work, you're like, how can I say, get the frequencies out of the cavity of the like vessels. So the scale is totally different. But like what is in common within your work is you're thinking of this cavity as a space where the body is. Or like cavity as a metaphor of the body, I would say. Yeah, and then, yeah, so when you talk about this kind of like cavity as a metaphor of the body, I was just thinking of like some other references, which is so there's this thinker called Austrian Neymanis. Like she's talking about like she's proposing this idea of like hydrofeminism. So like she's using the metaphor of water to think about the like body, especially for the female body, and then talking about the feminism from that perspective. And what she's saying is this kind of like body as a water, or like how can I say, like that is somehow connected to all the other different things, and then like the particle is actually allows you to be connected with other, because that's the trait of the water. And then also what I felt is it looks like the spatial experience of your body in your project is something like your body is connected to someone else, or like through that like acoustic experience. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about, and also would like to hear if you have any like comments or like like spatial design or like acoustic experience, how you design acoustic experience there, or like, yeah.
Yeah, it's true that I actually used to think of empty space almost as like a medium before I realized that it's not the empty space, but it's the music that comes from that space and that intrinsic relationship between music and form. And when I was working at the Met, I kept finding objects that sang an E flat, like the E flat in the middle of the keyboard, more than any other note. And I was searching for like a long time to find certain notes, but these E flats, hundreds of them kept coming back. And of course, the curators at the Met were like, whoa, why do we have so many E flats in our collection? And they started questioning, okay, we had to theorize this, like, is it the relationship between the body and the object that all civilizations share? The fact that the radius of the arm is related between every potter in modern human history? Or is it the volume that we need to carry with us or contain as humans is shared between cultures? Because this is going across thousands of years and all over the planet that this note kept coming out of these vessels. And so that empty space, and if you like, what you're saying about perceiving the body through, in this case, water, but if you think about perceiving the body through sound, and the fact that my voice, for example, is also shared with every modern, like biologically modern human. So for about 200,000 years, our voices have been like this. And that means that we're working with the same tool that every other culture around the world now and going back is working with. And this voice that we all have, it's not just a voice, it's a whole complex series of beautiful structures. Like if you sing one note, it sounds like one note when we listen to it, but if you looked at the frequencies on a spectrograph, you'd see that you're actually singing about 25 to 30 notes And our brains are turning that into what we think of as the voice. Like there's an amazing thing happening when we speak and sing to each other. And even the fact that like when I speak, my voice is making every single atom in your bodies resonate in synchrony with my voice. And when you speak back, you're making every atom in my body resonate and move. You're moving my body with your voices. So yeah, that idea of this idea of Astrid is actually really resonant.
Just one thing on that subject is the fact that you mentioned the body is made of water. That's true, but it's also made of emptiness, and there's a lot of and actually the voice is also the consequence of resonance or our own emptiness. And I was thinking of this piece that you did, which I've never seen actually performed. I wish I could see it one day. Is the two interpreter working on percussion on other people's face, like people are percussive on other people's face, and an opera singer, for instance, know how to feel empty spaces in the face so that the voice can be projected and be louder and be stronger and everything. So there's this notion also, which I think is important, is that our body is also made of empty spaces that is filled with the voice, and the voice is carrying also this part of the body.
Yeah, actually, like within this, water-filled space, like first of all, like the sound resonance is totally different, and then emptiness is the one that actually make the space very like acoustic apparatus. So yeah, that's very interesting. And then seems like we're running out of time, so I would like to pass the microphone to the audience. So if you have any questions to Oliver or us or whatever, like, can you raise your hand or?
今から質問の方日本語でしていただきますので、この後逐次通訳が入ります。So after his question, there will be a consecutive interpretation. So please wait for a moment.
はい。気になったんですけど、20個30個くらいの音が一つになって聞こえるっていうのって具体的に何なのか知りたいです。以上です。
Okay, I think you mentioned how what feels like one sound is actually a combination of 20 to 30 different sounds. Can you give me concrete examples of what that is like?
Sure. So the best example that everyone knows is what's called head singing or Tibetan practice. Often you've heard these monks who will sing multiple notes at the same time. It kind of, I can't do it, unfortunately. But you hear them sing a very low note, like, but then at the same time you hear this amazing series of high. Does that sound familiar, right? And that harmonic series. I can't believe I can whistle in tune. Is them highlighting, amplifying the different notes within their voice by changing the shape of their mouths. So in fact, it's just like everything we've just seen. It's the cave, but it's your mouth is the cave, and they're changing the shape of the cave in order to highlight the different harmonics from within the voice. So it's getting a little bit technical, but that's what I meant by saying that when you're singing one note, you're singing many notes. And it's true for every single human voice. And when you're making a cave sing, for example, you don't want to sing all the notes. So I teach the singers to suppress all of those extra high ones, and they make them sing like a cave or like a pot, and it sounds kind of like, right? It's sort of like a very, very neutral sound. But that's kind of hard work, but it's the first thing. Every time I work with singers in these spaces, I have to teach them, first of all, to kind of hear the note of the space and then eliminate all of the extra notes from their voice so that they are perfectly in tune with it.
Any other questions or comments? If not, we're just gonna keep the conversation, if there's any.
日本語にしますね。ありがとうございます。大変興味深いプレゼンテーションでした。で、質問ではないんですけれども、私がアートを描くとき、描くとき、やはり音楽の影響をたくさん受けます。で、私が思うアートっていうのは、私たちの、心とか、精神、そして体にもヒーリングを作用するようなものだというふうに考えています。で、コラボレーション、アートと音楽と音楽または、サウンドですねと、絵のコラボレーションによってさらにもっと、ヒーリング効果があるなというふうに今日のプレゼンテーションを拝見してさらにそれを思いました。で、アートもサウンドもバイブレーションエナジーだと思うのでそのエナジーをとても感じました。はい、以上です。
Okay, thank you very much for the interesting presentation. This is not really a question, it's more of a comment, but when I create my own artwork, when I draw things, I do get inspiration and an impact from music as well. And I think my art is about the healing power of not only your body, but your mind as well. And so when I look at your artwork, it's a collaboration between music, sound, and drawing. And I thought by collaborating different mediums together, I think you get a better healing effect. And so, you know, art, when you make drawings, that's also, sound is, first of all, a vibration. And then the paintings is also like vibes. So I think it was a really interesting collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, so thanks a lot for sharing your beautiful work. And I think it was very interesting to hear how you said that the visual art can't really be separated from sounds or voices. And it's also interesting because a lot of musical events, especially in the electronic music industry, also integrate art in their events. And you also collaborate with artists, like with, musical artists in your work. And so my question is, do you also, because you also said that you would produce music or you're like a musician, are there also more plans from your side to produce music and integrate your art or collaborate with musical artists?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many plans. At the moment, I have a solo show at the Museum of Modern Art in Paris, the Musée d'Art Moderne, and I'm collaborating with 4,000 Parisian children to make an animation film. And I'm also recording music with those kids. I've turned the galleries into a huge drawing studio and a huge recording studio. And over the 3 months of the exhibition, 4,000 kids are going to come through the museum and make a recording and a drawing. And I'm going to work then with a composer who's not me, but an electronic composer, to compile the audio into a soundtrack, and the drawings, the 4,000 drawings, will become each frame of the animation film. And the result visually is part of a series which I've been working on for some time. So you have this very spectacular psychedelic visual, but then this is the first time I've done it working with so many young musicians and also a very established composer as well, to create, I guess, what will be a work that's very similar in form to The Cave, because it will be multi-screens, but the content will be like completely on the other side of the planet. I'll also hope to release a vinyl of the music from this piece in the spring in Paris, if I'm able to get it done in time. And I'll be having a show of my resonance paintings made from The Cave, music and from The Cave singers, presented with Galerie Thaddeus Ropac in Paris in their Marais space. And hopefully you'll be able to play the vinyl in the space and hear the music that made the paintings, at the same time. But yeah, I think probably because I always made music since I actually only started making music because I grew up in the countryside with a family that had no contact with music or art. but a woman came in off the street into our house asking if she could hide her piano in our barn because she was running away from the bailiffs. She was bankrupt. And my parents said yes, and she brought a Steinway into our barn and then disappeared. And I taught myself piano on this instrument, which was like a completely magical object to me. And with that very basic start, I was able to get a music scholarship to a school, which then I created my band there, and I ended up studying music at university and art. And so really, for me, music was that meeting with that musical moment completely changed my life, because music is so collaborative. Like, as soon as you start making music or performing music, you are immediately in a conversation with either your fellow musician or with your audience. So yeah, in answer to your question, I don't think I'll ever stop working with musicians and other artists, because it's so much. It's infinitely surprising, infinitely exciting, you know.
I'm curious, since your practice kind of encompasses sound and space, color and texture in your resonance paintings, I'm curious to know if you ever think about the concept of synesthesia, or if you ever experience synesthesia directly yourself.
Yeah, super interesting. It's funny enough, I came across synesthesia very young. Like, my biology teacher told me about it, and was obviously immediately very interested. And I remember the examples that he showed us a little documentary about it, and synesthesia is the mixing up of your senses neurologically. So you can taste sound, or you can hear food, hear taste, or and the examples in this documentary from the mid-2000s was someone who could look at a color and hear a sound, or they'll hear music and they'll see color. But there were also very concrete examples of, for example, a woman who could taste words, and so she would literally, if someone said table, she would have the taste of a specific thing. And I remember that her boyfriend's name gave her the taste of apple crumble, and it was so bad by the end that she had to break up with him because she couldn't stand tasting apple crumble the whole time. And this synesthetic phenomenon is so specific, and there's so many, I think, people who evoke it in their work, artists who talk about synesthesia. I actually think that we don't have synesthesia, most of us. There is a fundamental relationship between the senses, and when you talk about the dark voice, for example, or a particular key being light or heavy or sad, I've been always very careful to avoid claiming any connection to synesthesia, because I don't think I have that, but I do think that we all have a sensitivity to sound and to space that our visual culture has allowed us to forget. I think part of going back into this cave was realizing how deep, I've worked with the relationship between music and art my whole adult life, and to go into the earliest visual space that we have in humanity, one of the earliest, and to find that there's a relationship between music and the painting was just this amazing sort of I don't know, it had always felt so natural, and it was so amazing to see it there. But yeah, synesthesia is a funny thing. Kandinsky, Paul Klee, I think the relationship between abstract painting and music is also really important. And the artists who spoke to us about how they listen to music whilst making artwork, that I would say that in a way we all have that. Either no one really has it, or we all have it, if you see what I mean.
今日はありがとうございました。私は楽器を吹くんですけれども、17本の竹筒を頭蓋骨のそばで共鳴をさせながら音を鳴らす楽器です。で、雅楽の楽器はそれぞれ昭和光を表していたり、一
人の声であったり、竜笛は竜が飛ぶ音、もしくは竜の鳴き声って言われていたりします。なのでその雅楽の楽器が今日のプレゼンテーションにあったような装置でどのような作品になるのか非常に興味がありますっていうことと、私は母親なんですけれども、子供がぐずって泣いた時に、私の胸に子供の頭を置いて、で私がシーとかよしよしとかあやすような言葉を静かに静かに語りかけてた時に、だんだん子供が落ち着いて眠ったりまでする。なんかそのことをキスをしながら歌うとそれが起きるっていうお話で、お名前がオリバーさんのプロジェクトは非常に壮大なアートプロジェクトなんですけれども、それが私の母親としての経験にすごく近く共鳴ということで落とし込むことができて非常に面白かったです。ありがとうございました。
Okay, thank you. I am a traditional music instrument player. I play an instrument called sho, which is composed of 17 different pipes made of bamboo, and then you will resonate that right next to your skull. And then the Japanese instruments have each their own symbolic meaning, such as the sho would be your voice, and there are other instruments as well. But I was wondering how the Japanese instruments would fit into the cave and what kind of piece you can create out of that. And another question is, I am a mother of a child, and then whenever they are crying, I would just cuddle them and then I will sing to them, and you would have this resonating feeling between your child. So that experience made it really easy for me to understand the cave and being inside and resonating and sharing the feelings together as a mother.
Thank you. Yeah. In relation to your question about Japanese instruments, it's true that every one of those 17 pipes is like a tiny cave, like a tiny little empty space. And the cave of your mouth and your voice is connecting then to those other tiny caves. And each of them is singing. And as you direct your breath into these different spaces, they resonate with your body. And if you took that instrument into the cave and you played the note of the cave, you would hear the sound of your instrument disappear and it would be expanded, and the cave would become the extension of your instrument. And so that's, in a way, the kind of magic of what's called resonance. This is what this project is about. And then what you said about motherhood is really important, because the first sense that we have is hearing. As an embryo, as a baby growing in the womb. Long before we have the sense of sight, we have the sense of sound. And so even before your child is born, when you're singing to them and they're hearing it, and you're moving them and you're stimulating their minds. And I think that relationship between like mother and child, you can see it in my work. The work previously to this, my mom has featured in many of my works. My grandmother has posthumously featured in many of my works. And that relationship between two people through the voice, I don't think it can be any more eloquently and movingly expressed than through the relationship between mother and child. And if music becomes the conduit, like the link between those two bodies, if you sang to your child to calm them and to comfort them, that piece of music that you sang is something that was given to you by someone who sang to you maybe, or it came from somewhere way beyond us, but it becomes the instrument, the channel that then connects you and it connects every other mother to this entity that they are nurturing and trying to, in some way, continue that heritage, that passing on of music and family, So it's really nice to hear that you have that experience.
Thank you so much for all the questions and comments, and then we will be wrapping up here. So, lastly, huge applause to Hansel and also Oliver.
では改めまして登壇者の皆様、そしてオリバーさんありがとうございました。こちらをもちまして2024年の ACK トークスすべて終了となるんですが、それぞれのトークはすべてアーカイブされる予定ですので、そちらもぜひお楽しみください。では皆様ありがとうございました。